Welcome to the Surrogacy Warrior podcast with your host, Kim Surratt. Join us as we dive deep into the heart of surrogacy, offering insights, sharing stories, and providing advice. Our mission is to illuminate every corner of surrogacy, from the emotional roller coasters and legal battles to the triumphant moments of birth and beyond. Surrogacy Warrior is more than just a podcast. It's a community for anyone touched by or interested in the transformative power of surrogacy. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, 𝗧𝗪sforfamilies.com. Now here's the host of Surrogacy Warrior, Kim Surratt.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Surrogacy Warrior. This is the podcast where we navigate not just surrogacy, but the incredible journey through assisted reproduction. I'm Kim Surratt. I'm an attorney in Nevada and California, practicing in surrogacy law for 23 years now, hard to admit. I'm your host. I'm a passionate advocate for this area of law, and through my journeys of doing this, I ended up in Mexico City about a year ago, and I met Enya, and Enya is one of my favorite attorneys in Mexico at this point. Welcome, Enya. Thank you for joining us. Tell the world about yourself, a little bit about yourself, and we'll dig into Mexico.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim, for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, I'm Enya, as you said, Enya Quezada. I'm a lawyer, attorney based in Mexico City. And my area of expertise is surrogacy and everything regarding family law. I represent families here in Mexico from different parts of the world, different countries, that come to do their cross-border journeys to surrogacy here in Mexico. And well, my job is to help them get everything aligned to our legislation here, even though there's not a lot, and we will go, I guess, on to that. But just helping them do legal and ethical processes here of surrogacy.
Okay, so let's dig into this because I get calls all the time, and to be honest, surrogacy has just gotten so expensive in the United States that people are desperately looking for some other options, and just availability of surrogates, because it's getting harder and harder to get matched in the United States. No matter what the cost is, it's hard to find a surrogate. So Mexico's definitely on the option list. It's close to us. But let's talk about what legislation do you have, or case law, really? What cases do you have in Mexico to support surrogacy?
Well, depending on the state where you want your process to happen here in Mexico, the legislation may be different. In Mexico, we only have 2 states where surrogacy is regulated, meaning that there's a specific law establishing the minimal requirements for procedures to happen. Those states are really well known. They're always talked about. Not my favorite ones, to be honest, which are Tabasco and Sinaloa. And I say they're not my favorite ones because even though there's regulation, the law has a lot of room to grow. There are different absences in the law itself that I think sometimes lead to not so ethical journeys. And in fact, we've seen that due to that, the other states where there's no legislation have become a more famous destination, especially for cross-border surrogacy. Most of the cases I represent are in Mexico City, which is one of the states where there's no specific regulation, but there are general human rights across local legislation, like the Constitution of Mexico City, that allow us to base a process looking for the protection of the rights of the carriers, of the intended parents, and more importantly, I would say, the children involved in that will be born through these surrogacy processes. So in these states, such as Mexico City, where there is no regulation, what we need to use is basic human rights as the guide, and have the support of our courts as well, local and federal courts as well, that can guide us through that process and that can guide the authorities that will be in charge of recognizing the identity rights, the affiliation rights of the children and the intended parents on how they should do their jobs based on the constitutional basic human rights. So it does depend on the state where you are, but in those states where there is no regulation, what we use is our federal and local constitutions and the support of the judiciary system, the courts, who will interpret all these laws to instruct our administrative authorities to recognize the rights of everyone.
So when you talk about your constitutional human rights, I know of your Supreme Court cases, and I always brag about it because I'm so jealous of it. I wish I had a case like it, but tell us about your Supreme Court, how it looks at the human rights in Mexico, because obviously that's a key element where you're saying to us, well, if you go to these other states without regulation, that's the key element. So what
Yes.
are those? How does Mexico look at those human rights?
Well, our constitution, I also brag about this a lot. Our constitution does recognize all human rights as the law that all authorities have to protect and have to make sure it's complied with. And our Supreme Court is the highest court in charge of making sure that these human rights, all of the human rights recognized in our Constitution, are actually respected by all authorities. And they set case law that serves as law, has the same legal force as any other specific regulation. And our Supreme Court, especially for surrogacy, has set really groundbreaking precedents, recognizing that even though there is no law in most of the states here in Mexico regarding surrogacy, it is legal to do it. And it is legal because it is according to the rights of every person, regardless of their nationality, regardless of their sex, of their civil status, to have their own families. And also it is according to the right of all women and all people, all persons, also regardless of their nationality, to decide over their own bodies. And so in that case, women have the right to decide whether they want to be part of these procedures of these surrogacy journeys to help other people. And that is the basis that, according to our Supreme Court, sets the legal pathway for surrogacy journeys to be legal. And at the same time, the Supreme Court has ruled on what the minimal protocols should be respected in this type of procedure. I would say really minimum, but at least there are some elements we have to take care of, which the first one is for women that want to be part of these procedures to have full informed consent. And that means that they have to be aware of all the different repercussions this procedure has, not only medically, but legally speaking as well. So they have to be informed by their medical team on what the risks are and accept them. If they don't accept them, it's okay for them to choose not to continue to be part of a surrogacy journey. But if we can have that informed consent gathered since the beginning and all throughout the different medical steps of the journey. That's the legal element that, according to the Supreme Court, is one of the most important things to take care of. And legally speaking as well, that is why it is always recommendable for surrogates to have their own representation, legal representation throughout their journeys since the beginning, since the negotiation of a surrogacy contract until the moment everything is everything about the filiation rights after birth are solved either through a court case or an administrative case. The surrogate has to be informed of all the legal effects that each step of the process may have in her own life. So by having that medical informed consent and that legal guidance, we can make sure that this element that the Supreme Court has ruled on is met. We also have to make sure that the surrogate is in good conditions, not only physically, but psychologically speaking. And socially, we would add that socially speaking as well. We have to make sure that her body is in a good condition to go through a hormonal treatment for an embryo transfer, to go through the pregnancy and a birth and a postpartum process. And also make sure that her context is well aligned with what she may need throughout the whole process. So in order for us to make sure that we meet these criteria from the Supreme Court, we have to make sure that since the early stages of the process, the surrogate goes through assessments, psychological assessments, medical assessments, socio-economical assessments as well, that can provide us a full overview of her context and make sure that if there are special risks regarding or based on her conditions, we can either make sure they are taken into consideration and take any necessary precautions to avoid those risks from happening throughout the process. Let's say she's living really far away from a hospital. Her address is far away, and it would lead to, if there is any medical need or urgency, it will take her 2 hours to get to a hospital. So we need to take those type of conditions, specific conditions, into consideration to make sure that her context is also given her the tools and the conditions to have a safe process. And psychologically speaking as well, we have to make sure that she understands what she's doing, not only the legal side or the medical side, but the emotional side, because this, as all surrogacy journeys are, it's a roller coaster of emotions, and surrogates are the ones that have to deal with that as well. So they need to understand the extension of the psychological effects that this may have as well. So those type of assessments will allow us to protect her since the beginning, or have guarantees for her in case any of these risks come into place. Or if we find that there are no ways to guarantee these type of risks, that they will not happen, or that there will be no solution for them, well, it is always good to speak to them and tell them and inform them, to have them know and have their consent, be fully aware of the risks that may be involved. So
I want to bring out one thing that you said quite a while ago, but I want to highlight it for those listening, which is Enya made a comment about how it's a human right for no matter what your citizenship. So back to the human right. So this is an important element, because this means this is where anybody international is welcome in Mexico for surrogacy purposes, for assisted reproduction. So even if a foreigner is in your country utilizing your fertility clinics, these are the same rights they would have.
Yes,
Yeah.
there is no distinction between nationalities in terms of the human right to have your own family and to use fertility techniques, to assisted reproductive techniques to actually perform that human right. And assisted reproductive techniques in Mexico are recognized, not so well regulated because, again, we have a lot of room to grow in terms of legislation, not only in surrogacy, but in all reproductive techniques. But they are recognized, so that's a starting point. And by them being recognized as a legal and, as a legal way to create your own families, um, it means that all humans, according to this human right to family, must have access to these rights, to the techniques, meaning they can come to Mexico even they may not be nationals, or citizens or residents, regardless of their immigration status. They can come and use the clinics here, as long as clinics, of course, work legally speaking, with protocols that protect the minimal requirements for these techniques to be legal. So yes, that is not a problem. If you are a foreigner wanting to come to Mexico, you can do it. You can do a surrogacy journey legally. Now, you have to prepare for that. Cross-border surrogacy in Mexico is legal, but it has a lot of different elements we have to consider. And for these families that are willing to come to Mexico and looking at Mexico as an option for surrogacy, we have to take into consideration that our law here will be sufficient for you to have a recognition of parenthood at the end of the process. But we have to take into consideration as well the law of the home countries where the people come. That is why it's really important that even though you will have the right as a foreigner to come to Mexico, it's important to also take into consideration the law in your home country and work with legal teams in both sides that coordinate a strategy.
No matter what country you're dealing with,
Yes.
this is a critical element. Mexico's not special in this regard.
Yes.
Every cross-country surrogacy matter has to have some deep legal analysis. So if you're skipping the lawyers, you're doing yourself harm. You've got to talk to the lawyers. So I can't tell you how many cases I send to Enya where it's too late down the road, there's too many problems, and she does a great job as a fixer, but we would all prefer not to be fixing.
Yes. Yeah, we would really appreciate it if we can plan a strategy since the beginning. And we always recommend this to our clients. I make a lot of emphasis on this, to have a lawyer in your home country since the beginning. And I love to meet with them because there's always things that I may not be looking at that may be relevant for their own legislation. And that's why we need expertise from the legal side in their country. So, yes, it is crucial. It is absolutely necessary to have a legal team in both countries. Here in Mexico, we know the law, but I don't know how these procedures, how these recognition of filiation may affect you or benefit you in your home country. So we have to take that into consideration. And we have to be really respectful of foreign legislation as well, because that's where the babies are going to. So we don't want to fix something here that will be a lifetime problem in your home country. Sometimes it's inevitable because maybe our legislations are incompatible, but there are ways to reduce the negative effects of these contradictory legislations. So it's always good to plan that since the beginning. We can always fix things, and I love to fix things, but it is always better
But
in
not
the
always.
best in,
We have cases where they can't be fixed,
yeah,
and
I mean, yeah,
this,
that's true.
they don't have countries to go home to, and we have problems. So this is,
Yeah.
yeah, just to be clear. We'll
Yeah.
talk about, so I want to talk about the legal process for parentage in Mexico. But first, I kind of want to back up for a second because, you talked about everything that a lot of people would sit there and go, okay, this sounds a lot like the journeys we hear about in the United States. We're looking at psychological, we're looking at her physical ability, her medical screening ability to carry a baby. We're looking at social abilities to pursue the journey. So what goes wrong in Mexico? Where are the problems? Because we also hear very inconsistent problems with
Yeah.
agencies and and not so healthy, not so happy journeys.
Yeah.
Where's that disconnect?
Yeah. Well, I think the origin of all of our problems here is the lack of legislation or poor legislation. And that allows for, just as I said in the beginning, that allows for not so ethical processes. Because when there's no law, you have a lot of liberties. And it's great, but the way you're gonna use or abuse these liberties, that is a problem. And we've seen a lot of abuse in different cases where sometimes surrogates are not even informed fully of what they're gonna do. There are agencies without protocols that just look for someone and that's it. There are cases where children and families have to stay here for a year without documentation. So there are a lot of problems because of these desperate need of law that we have at this moment, or for better law. And the most common one, it's usually the problem that we see even with our clients, is the waiting period after birth. This is the most common concern for all families looking at Mexico as an alternative. And that is because once the baby is born, we have to have a judicial order instructing our administrative authorities how to issue a birth certificate of a baby born through surrogacy, recognizing the parents as such and avoiding any presumption of maternity for surrogates. So that means a trial. We have to start a trial against our authorities because either they will deny to issue a birth certificate in such way, or they won't know how to do it. So we have to start trials against them, either before birth or after birth. But in either process, the time to get these resolutions, it's uncertain. We don't have a way to ensure that, well, you will have a resolution in 2 weeks, in a month, in 3 months. It depends a lot on the courts. And even with the cases that are well prepared since the beginning, these trials have to take place. If you want a birth certificate with both parents or the parent on it and not the surrogate. And that is the uncertainty. And that sometimes means that the families have to stay in Mexico for whatever it takes, however long it takes for them to get these resolutions. And
I'm going to go on a soapbox for a second, which means
yes.
I'm going to rant for a second,
Yeah.
Which is no one should be pursuing a surrogacy anywhere in the world in which your end solution is leaving a surrogate on a birth certificate.
Yes.
You have put that surrogate at risk. You have put your own child at risk. And when I say that, I'm saying that when your child for their lifetime has a woman who you don't consider to be that child's mother on their birth certificate, you have guaranteed that she can show up at any time and cause problems. You have caused that child a lifetime of problems of enrolling for school with a parent that they can't get consent from, doing different passports. If you've got two parents on a birth certificate, it takes two parents to obtain a passport, because
Yes.
both parents have to consent. There are a million moments in a human's life where both parents have to consent to things.
Yeah.
And are you going to go back to that surrogate every time you need to do that? Is it fair to her? No, that's the other thing. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
fair to her to have liability as a parent on a birth certificate for the rest of her life.
And
And
I will add on to that. Oh, sorry to interrupt
yeah,
you, but
go for it. This
I
is
will add on to that if a surrogate has to recognize a child as hers, in Mexico, at least in Mexico City, it can be considered a crime because you are lying before a authority regarding your affiliation with someone else. That's a crime. That's specifically legislated. So, we have not seen, I will say that, we have not seen any investigation for this because it is really hard to investigate this, but we don't want that to happen. And we don't want to put the surrogates in this kind of risk. And I'm pretty sure that if the surrogates recognizing children as theirs knew that this is a crime, they wouldn't do it. So sometimes, and I would say most of the times when surrogates have to recognize or are requested to register the children as theirs, is because they were not fully informed of what they were doing. So that by itself, it's a crime, and it goes against all the minimal requirements that according to our
invalid
Supreme Court.
surrogacy, right? Because it's a valid surrogacy required informed consent, and she didn't have the information. She wasn't provided the information. So now, on top of that, you have an invalid surrogacy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of
And
places where this happens. It's not just Mexico. I mean, this is where, and I know it comes out of desperation. I get it. But
yes,
desperation is not a good mechanism for parentage. You've got to slow yourself down. You have to do things properly, no matter how
yes.
badly you may want a child or how badly your clients may want a child, because we have a lot of lawyers that listen to this podcast also. It's not the right solution. And some will say, yeah, but we'll look at the United States, perhaps, if the intended parents are from the United States. You have intended parents from all over the world. But for example, in the United States, and can we do an adoption here so we can take her off? Yeah, but that doesn't mean you cured the problem in Mexico. You may be able to do an adoption to get both parents recognized and have parentage for both intended parents, but you have still a gaping problem, a big problem in Mexico where she's still on the birth certificate. And Mexico doesn't necessarily recognize what the United States is doing to correct the parental problem in the United States or
Yes,
other countries.
exactly. And also because adoption in Mexico requires for the parties not to have a pre-agreement and even more, not to have compensations. It is illegal to compensate the biological mother for the adoption. So no, it is incompatible in Mexico. I would say that it will be really hard for things to change regarding affiliation and the birth certificate here. It will be really hard, and I would say even legally impossible. But I don't know how families are fixing these type of problems, or if they are even trying to do so. But it is a problem, and one thing is that the surrogate will always be affected by this recognition. Her children will be affected by this as well. Once, let's say, the surrogate dies and her children will start the inheritance process, trials, etc. They will have to look for that other child. Wherever this child is, that will have a cost on them So it's not only affecting the surrogate, but her family as well. And it's a lifelong problem that goes even after birth, after death. So never recommendable to leave the surrogate on the birth certificate. It is really hard, and I would say even legally impossible to change that in Mexico. And it has a lot of risks. So
out there that have that right now and pursued Mexico, took the shortcut advice. My experience has been that agencies that recommend putting the surrogate on the birth certificate are doing it as a cheaper mechanism and trying to keep the costs down and pretending like that's the right way to do it. But I know from you, and I want you to explain, what is the right way to do it? What's the process for doing it the right way?
So the right way, I would say, it's to do whatever judicial strategy you find. There are many different judicial strategies out there. That's one good thing of not having a specific law. You have different doors that you can knock on to have a judge involved in this case and have this judge recognize the affiliation that you deserve with your child and to deny any type of maternity for the surrogate to that may be imposed, and instruct the administrative authorities, the registrar's office, how to issue the specific birth certificate for your child. That's the correct way. There are different strategies out there. Myself, I have experience with my law firm. We have experience with 3 different strategies, but there are many more. So it is, if an agency says, or even a lawyer says, there is no way for that to happen, they're lying. Or there is no easy way to do it. They are. Yes.
That they can't remove the surrogate from the birth certificate, they are lying.
Yes.
Everybody listen to that, whether it's an agency or a lawyer or somebody, a clinic telling you that, it is wrong. Right.
Yes, it is wrong. And you have to look for the strategy that suits you best. That is also why I cannot say which strategy is the best, because it must be tailored to you, to your home country legislation. If it's in the US, it may also depend on the state where you are. So we have to take those type of things into consideration to see what kind of strategy, judicial strategy, may be the most adequate for you and your needs, not only here in Mexico, but also outside of Mexico. So it could be through local courts, it could be through federal courts. We have a lot of options. So look for the one that suits you best. You have to consider, however, that this will take time. Even if you start a process during the pregnancy in order to get a resolution prior to the birth, this will allow you to have easier access after birth to a birth certificate as it should be issued, but it doesn't mean that it will be immediate. All legal procedures in Mexico take time, and they also have different type of obstacles that sometimes it is not in our control. And we have to be really flexible in this type of waiting period, even especially after birth. And I get it. It is hard to have patience while you're new to paternity and maternity, and you have a child that you have to take care of in a country that's not yours, away from your family. I get it. We do empathize with that. We try to find the strategies that allow families to leave and have their documents as fast as possible and leave, but it is not immediate. Those agencies that guarantee journeys with birth certificates within 2 weeks after birth, I would be really careful with them. What kind of strategies are they looking at? Do they have a strategy? are they taking into consideration all the different factors that can appear after birth? So the guarantee is not the time, but the results. And this is from our cases, the cases that I've been in. We've always had resolutions with recognition of filiation, because that's human right. That's according to our human rights. It would be harder for a judge to justify denial than to justify the protection of the child in their best interest by recognizing their actual family reality. So you will have that ruling at the end. The time, we don't know. It depends a lot on the strategy. It depends a lot on the court. It depends a lot as well on the case. So there are general strategies, but it must be tailored to each case, and that means that the results may differ according to the process and according to the court. So that's.
How long are you telling people to expect?
We
What's
always.
the worst scenario? I know you can't tell them when it'll happen, but is it months?
It is months. I would say it's months. Now, I can tell you our best and our worst case scenario. Our best case, we did have a birth certificate 2 weeks after birth. It was a great case. It went really well. The court analyzed and understood everything without question. That's why it was really easy to get, or not easy, but it was really effective. Efficient, exactly. So we had a birth certificate 2 weeks after birth, and they were able to get a passport 2 weeks after that. So a month here while working on this, on all their documentation. They were able to be right after their Mexican passport was issued. Now, we've had really worst case scenarios where they have been here for 6 months, and I would say this is my toughest case so far. They had to stay here for 6 months because we started this case, I think it was 3 weeks before the birth. So we had to.
Didn't have them from the beginning.
We did not have them. Yes. We had to fix a lot of things regarding their contract, regarding the execution of that contract, the compliance to that contract. And it was also really challenging because, and this is why, again, I want to emphasize this, the family did not have a attorney in their home country. And that meant that we had to plan our strategy based only on Mexican law, but then we found out right after the birth that this strategy would be a problem in their home country. So we had to fix things after that. So that led to a lot of delays, changing our strategies, changing our courts, changing a lot of things that led to a 6-month waiting period. Of course, the family could leave at the end of these 6 months, but it was really, it was a challenge to fix things. And that's why it took us 6 months for them to leave. But generally speaking, what I'm seeing is that families tend to take between 12 and 14 weeks to have everything. On
average.
On average. And by everything, I mean a whole trial started and ended with a favorable resolution, having a birth certificate based on that resolution, and also having a Mexican passport or sometimes foreign passports given by the embassies here in Mexico. So that's the average time. That's why we always recommend families to plan for a stay of minimum 3 months. If you leave before that, which is possible, we've seen that, and more I've seen that happening. But That's great. If you can leave before that, that's great. But if you can plan for 3 months, well, that's the average. So you wouldn't have to then look for other for a new accommodation or something like to replan your stay in Mexico if you are planning for these 3 months. If it goes over 4 months, it's because there's a specific problem in your case, I would say. Or a specific problem with the court, or a specific problem, an obstacle that's
Agency or
specific.
the surrogate being informed and things are bad to
Exactly.
start with.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what that means on the reverse side of that is people need to be prepared, and their lawyers need to be preparing them in their home country that, hey, that means you've got to have time away from work. You've got
Yes.
to assure that whatever country you're coming from into Mexico, if a visa is required or travel requirements, that you don't exceed the amount of time you're supposed to be in Mexico, that you have accommodations, as you said, an apartment, the ability, the financial means to stay that long. I have had, just to give a creative solution, I have had intended parents swap out time being with the child in Mexico while one goes home and works for a little bit, the other comes back, they swap out. It's your child that has the problem relocating. It's not you. You still have the ability to travel. It's just, don't abandon your child or you're going to have a different problem on your hands. But if one can stay, for the duration and the other comes back and forth if they need to. Now, again, that's all financial means to travel like that, right? You've got to, and what I hear from most people is they had no idea about any of this, about the time frame. The agency didn't inform them. They never really had true independent legal counsel in the beginning, and they're just now learning a few weeks before the birth of their child that they may have to stay for a long time, and they can't do it. They say to me, but I can't, I have to be at work. And it's like, well, then you've got another problem on your hand. Who's going to stay with your child? Can you find somebody, a family member to go with you? Something. You're going to have to do something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I do see a lot of families doing that swapping arrangement, one staying here, another one leaving. We also have single parents coming to do their journeys here. For them, it's not really easy, of course, to leave. Sometimes they leave the babies with their family members, their closest family members, because, as you said, they do have the opportunity to go back and forward. It is the child that has to stay here. But I mean, there are a lot of solutions, and those type of conditions have to also be informed to the court so that they empathize with your process. That is why it's really important to know all the elements, all the context of your process, how you plan to do it, so that your attorneys have elements to provide to the court on the urgency, on the need for their involvement in this case. So yeah, it's good if you can go back and forward. That's really common. There's no problem with that. But if you cannot do it, one way is to get the support from the court. And by that, you need to provide the court with elements on the need, on the urgency, because you will get those documents at the end, 99% chances that you will, but the time is a element that we have to fight. So we have to provide our courts with elements to know that I know you're going to do your job, but please put this as a priority, especially for those families coming, single parents, single mothers coming to do their journeys here. But it is possible. But you do have to take a lot of arrangements for that.
99% is because there's still a percentage where the surrogate's own human rights were so violated that it wasn't a real surrogacy. And that surrogates were so taken advantage of And so I can't tell you how many people I talk to that are with certain agencies in Mexico who say, well, I don't know who the surrogate is. I don't know if she's, being taken care of. I don't even know if the compensation's getting to her. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Being in the dark is not okay. If you're going to do a
Yes.
journey in another country other than your own, and I'm not talking about just US citizens, anyone going across borders, you need to know. You can't be in the dark. You can't pretend, just say, well, I paid an all-inclusive price and they're taking care of everything for me.
Yeah.
Ta-da! Because you're going to end up in this situation and you're going to end up in Enya's office and having her help you.
Yes. Yeah. In order to avoid being that 1%, is to prepare a good process since the beginning, a transparent process. I think that is one of the qualities that all successful surrogacy processes have in common: transparency. Judges love to see that all parties know what they're doing. They know each other. That there was not a single thing where abuse could happen, because not only did the parents have legal representation, but also the surrogate. Not only the parents had information on what the medical procedures were, but also the surrogate. So, and both parties had the opportunity to talk to each other and arrange a process fitted to them, to what they want, to what they need, to their expectations. That the surrogate had someone that if she didn't want to speak out, she had someone that speak out for her, that represented her throughout the whole process. Agencies sometimes sell all-inclusive packages where they say, well, I'm gonna help you with any type of problem, but agencies do a good job in this as intermediaries, but they cannot substitute the legal representation of each party, the medical informed consent. So that is really, really important to avoid being that 1% that may not be successful. I've not seen that yet, but avoid being that 1%. You have to be really transparent. And this is a human process. This is not a business transaction. So you have to do a human process fitted to each person, fitted to what I want, what I need, what my special condition is. And it is great. I love seeing how families then connect with surrogates even after birth, even after going back home. And judges love that as well. They love to see that this was a human process, that this is in fact a process of humans supporting humans. That's it. Not a process of someone abusing someone else or someone taking advantage of the lack of information or the need of someone else. So that I would say is what convinces judges the most: transparency in the process. And transparency starts since the beginning. It starts since the moment the contract is
What makes
drafted.
surrogacy? What is surrogacy if there isn't transparency? You've got to have the intent to not be a parent, the intent for somebody else to
Yes.
carry your child. And if you don't have that because you had a bunch of, you thought there was some other system in place, or, whether you're going to another country other than Mexico or the United States, right? Anytime there's secrecy, you need to question whether it's a real surrogacy, and two, whether there's human rights violations. You
Yes.
have to. But what
Exactly.
makes surrogacy unless you don't, other than coming to the table and having an agreement and understanding each other, because otherwise it's adoption and it's
Yeah.
not your child, right? Yeah,
Exactly. That's why I always say adoption and surrogacy are so different.
they are.
Uh, they are just different legal figures that you cannot compare with each other. Sometimes there's some misunderstanding on this, but that is the difference exactly. Just as you said, the difference is the possibility to communicate with each other, to work on what's best for each other, to support each other, not just have being blindsided on what's happening in Mexico while I'm outside, what's happening in the pregnancy while I'm not there. So that's not surrogacy, as you said. It is a different thing.
It's a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate you so much. I think Mexico's in much better hands having you there as a lawyer. And
Thank
I
you.
just, the more we can talk about this, because so many people are doing it in the dark and taking the word of agencies. And I'm not saying all agencies are bad in Mexico. I'm just saying that there are some bad actors. And there's bad actors in the United States too. And there are bad actors all over the world right now. And it's our job to just keep talking about the right way to do it so that people, when they seek it out, have the information they need. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you, when we do our social media post about this podcast, we'll put your information out. But go ahead and tell everybody right now how they can find you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you can find me in LinkedIn. I'm as Enya Quezada. And you can also check the site of 𝗂𝗶𝗀𝗁𝗆 Abogados, which is 𝗂𝗶𝗁𝗆 We have articles there that may be of interest for families, especially families coming to do surrogacy in Mexico. And you will find our contact information there, emails, etc. My email, which is the way I can reach out to most people, is Enya@𝗂𝗶𝗁𝗆abogados.com. And well, those are the main streams of communication that I use. But, well, feel free to contact me anytime. Thank you for having me here as well, again. And, well, just happy to connect with people trying to send the message on how to do surrogacy ethically and in the best way possible. There are no perfect journeys, but there are journeys that can be enjoyed by everyone involved in the process. And that means to take a lot of precautions since the beginning. So happy to reach out to those interested in doing things ethically, correct, in the correct way and legally. So if you are interested, feel free to reach out.
And everybody should know, Enya and her firm are at the forefront of working with the Mexican government on trying to prepare regulations, trying to change this conversation so there are regulations in more locations, and not the frustrating regulations, the easier to work with regulations. But as there are any developments, we'll make sure we have Enya back on the podcast and make sure we let everybody know what's going on with that. But we will advertise you far and wide and make sure everybody has your information. Thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of Surrogacy Warrior. I really just appreciate you joining us, and I hope you found this to be an enlightening conversation. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you like it, make sure you share it, make sure if you have anything having to do with Mexico that you reach out to Enya and her firm and involve them early. Do not wait. That's all we can beg of everybody. The sooner you talk to a lawyer and understand the process. Now, if you talk to any other lawyer in Mexico and they tell you that the surrogate has to stay on the birth certificate, you need to change positions immediately and reroute to Enya as soon as possible, because that is not true. Yes. Reach out to us if you have any other ideas or suggestions on content that you would like to listen to. You can find information about me at lawyersforfamilies.com, and there's lots of information and resources there. But as we end the show with great thankfulness to Enya and to her firm, remember that you're not alone in this journey. Together we are warriors. Until next time, stay strong and keep fighting for your dreams.
You've been tuning into the Surrogacy Warrior podcast with your host, Kim Surratt. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawyersforfamilies.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.